Hey everyone, this is Bryce Burkhart from FITV, giving you a little step-by-step walkthrough of how to use your DSLR for video. Today's footage is coming from a Canon 60, and I'll be talking about the Canon 70, one of the cameras that we use for all of our projects at FITV. 70 is what we call a digital single lens reflex camera, or DSLR in layman's terms. These come in a wide range of formats, sizes, and levels of quality. The first thing I'll be talking about is aperture, which deals with the amount of light coming into your camera. To adjust your aperture, set your camera to M, which is right here. To adjust your aperture, set your camera into manual, and then see this number right here? It's really small, but you can see it. It says 5.6. You can adjust that using this wheel. And as you can see, it gets brighter and darker as I adjust it. Now this is adjusting the opening that's in the front of the lens. Right now we're at 3.5, which when you look at your lens, looks like it's the smallest number for aperture, but it's actually the largest number because it's f over 3.5, which is focal length over diameter of the entrance to the lens. With aperture, as you move closer to your subject and push the background further away from it, you'll create a thing called depth of field. This depth of field looks great, depending on the kind of effect you're going for. You can use this especially well when you have something in the foreground and background that's blurred out. So you can create this separation of your subject from the surroundings. This keeps a higher focus on them and just keeps the distractions well away from the person. These numbers typically range from f over 1.2 to f over 22, but can also be smaller or larger depending on your lens. Next we'll talk about the shutter speed, which is the amount of time it takes for the shutter to close, which of course means you've taken your picture. As I'll show you, as the number gets lower, such as 1 over 60, that means that the blade is open for 1/60th of a second. The higher that number, such as 1 over 2000, that means that the shutter was actually open less time. Once you've set your shutter speed and aperture to the settings that you want, you'll start to mess with your ISO, which is the sensitivity to light. The lower the number, the less sensitive the camera is to light. So 100 ISO, you would want to use that when you're outside on a hot summer day with the sun beaming down, whereas you would use something more like 1600 when you're inside shooting a video like we are right now. You can of course change your settings to match your ISO better so you don't have to go as high on your ISO, because you'll start to get a thing called grain. This grain, or noise as most people call it, is an issue. Next we have our frame rate, or FPS. Typically in the studio we'll shoot 24, 30, or 60 frames per second, since that's what our current cameras are capable of. Movies typically use 24 because it's more pleasing on the eyes and the motion looks a little bit more fluid, even though 30 is about what the eye normally sees. 60 frames per second is what we'll use when we want to add a little bit of slow motion effect to our video. It's not a lot, but until we get cameras that shoot at higher frames per second, we make do for now. Next we'll take a look at our lens. It has two switches on it. One says AF and MF, which changes whether you're in autofocus or manual focus, and the other has stabilizer, which is on or off. This makes a huge difference when you're hand holding your camera and shooting video. When you have it on, it creates a little bit more fluid motion when you're moving your camera from left to right, up and down, and just holding it in general. Once you turn it off, you can see just how much of a difference it makes. Having it off creates a sort of jittery, crazy looking motion and can make you kind of seasick. Of course, this does waste your battery life, but it can also be a lifesaver when you're out in the field trying to get that perfect shot. Also keep in mind that when you're shooting with stabilizer on, depending on the lens, it can be quite loud and interfere with your audio. So just keep these things in mind when you're shooting out in the field. Those were a few of the basics, so just remember, if you want to learn more, to get out there and just practice with your DSLR, because that's the best way to get used to your camera. This is Bryce Burkhart signing out from FITV. Boo-doo-doo-doo.